This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, co-founder, and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, Jamie Bogner. My guest on the podcast this week is Evan Price of Green Cheek Beer. Welcome to the podcast, Evan.
Thank you.
I did get it right. It is Green Cheek Beer, right?
Yeah, Green Cheek Beer. It's perfect. It's perfect.
I am super excited. We're going to not talk about hazy IPAs. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about hazy IPAs, but we're going to talk about West Coast style IPAs and the new ways that brewers on the West Coast are taking that venerated classic style. I mean, it seems like it's so old. It's 15 years old?
Yeah.
And putting new twists on it and incorporating some of the kind of flavor-forward approaches learned from some other styles of IPA making and bringing that back into the West Coast style. It's going to be a fun conversation. Can't wait. But first, as the brewing industry's premier choice for glycol chilling, G&D Chillers has set the standard on quality, service, reliability, and dedication to their customers' craft. Thinking outside the box, whether it's a simple relocation of the utility connections for a complex buildup or ground-level design and engineering, G&D is ready to meet the challenge. Contact G&D Chillers today at 800-555-0973 or reach out online at gdchillers.com. Mention this podcast and receive up to $1,000 worth of glycol with the purchase of any new G&D chiller.
That's pretty good.
That is pretty good.
Yeah.
Definitely mention this podcast if you're in the market for a G&D chiller.
Yeah, $1,000.
Yeah. Also, Tavour transports you to craft brewery bar stools all over the country. They obliterate the geographical divide that prevents you from walking directly through the doors of any brew pub. Don't just read about life, drink it. Download the free Tavour app to get sought-after independent craft beer delivered right to your door. Use code BREWING for $10 in cold, hard beer money.
And that just ships all over the states?
They're in quite a few states. I can't tell you exactly how many, but it's a kind of interesting strategy that they have there to kind of build their own distribution network and get a door-to-door beer.
Yeah, pretty cool.
It is kind of cool. Everything's changing for getting beer to people and getting beers into people's hands. So kind of cool to see folks not just doing the way that it's always been done.
Oh man, or just the wait in line thing, or just
what's wrong with waiting in line, Evan?
No, I'm like, look, I love the waiting in line thing. It's great for my business, but I've waited in line once for a beer, and it was for it's for Isabel Proximus when Lost Abbey did that big collab, and only the first and only time I've ever done a big beer release.
That one was probably worth it though.
Oh my God, it was worth it. Yes, it was absolutely worth it. That was I think that was definitely that was the first Goose kind of styled beer that I had ever had. I hadn't had Cantillon or any of the true lambics at that point in my life, and just having that beer and going and sitting back and going what is going on?
Right.
No adjuncts, but just this insanely, incredible beer that, just leaves this memory stamp that lasts a long time.
Yeah. And so you're a Southern California guy. Walk me a little bit through your arc of brewing and what got you to where you are now, launching Green Cheek Beer Company. It was about 2.5 years ago?
Yeah. We opened June 2017. I've been in Southern California my whole life, and I started homebrewing after getting back from a Euro trip when I was 21. And so when I was 21, I started homebrewing, and or maybe it was 22, something like that. Yeah, 21. And so then I just started homebrewing because a friend told me about it. I was awful at it. I kept making these beers, and I'd get so mad because I'd get so excited about it. I'd finish it, and then I would taste it in the end, and I'd be like, what am I doing? I can buy better beer than this.
Sure.
I'm putting so much time and effort into just, fucking something up. And so I decided that I had to go work for a brewery in order to learn how to make better beer, because forums weren't what they are now.
Right.
The amount of information that, I mean, just you guys push out there, I'm constantly reading going like, whoa, like, why wasn't this available whenever I was homebrewing?
Sure.
But anyway.
It's part of the arc of discovery that got us to where we are now in the world of brewing with this much information available. So you paid the dues, you know, but you're right. At that time, some of the best knowledge came from actually doing it hands-on at a brewery.
Yeah. So I started working at BJ's. They were closing down breweries at the time, and so I jumped around to 3 different locations during my 2 years there. I went to Hangar 24 Brewery as their first brewer years ago. I was there for about a year and a half. Then I went to Taps Fish House and Brewery, and I worked under Victor Novak, who's now the Golden Road brewmaster. And we had a lot of fun together there. We were Brewpub Group of the Year 2 years in a row that I was there, and man, it was just.
Is that where you got your taste for winning?
It is absolutely one of those like feelings that you can't ever really like describe. And the moment you get that first medal, it's like it's something that you want to continue to experience over and over. And so I definitely become very competitive with entering beers for these competitions. But we worked really well together. Working with Victor was awesome because he focused on lagers. And that was the main reason I wanted to go work with him, was to just be able to get a better understanding of what he was doing with these lagers and why they tasted so good. And so, yeah, that was awesome working with Victor. I then went to Noble Ale Works after that, and so I was at Noble for 5 years and running the beer program there. And so that was the first time that I ran a beer program, and it was awesome. I fell on my face a bunch with not understanding how to put a recipe together, not understanding water chemistry, and slowly things kind of came in line as I just failed up, and so continuing to learn from my mistakes, tasting the beer, and then improving upon it. And so, I was at Noble for 5 years. During that time, we total humble brag, by the way. Humble brag? Is that a thing?
Yeah.
During that time, we were Brewery of the Year at World Beer Cup, which was just still like the biggest shock ever to me. That whole moment, that moment was so awesome too, because right before I left on that trip, my wife and I had found out that we were having twin boys. And so I'm like, I get out there, and then this whole thing happens. We won a gold for IPA, a silver for a Goza, and then a bronze for a double IPA. And it was just one of those like life-turning moments.
Sure.
Where
like maybe you can make a career out of this.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like that.
Maybe this isn't just a short-term thing that I'm doing kind of on the side, or until I figure out what I want to do with my life.
No, exactly. I guess, that absolutely, goes through your mind, where it's just like, why am I doing this? I need to get a better job where I can support my family,
right.
The range of other things. But we had that moment, and then it was from that point on that I was just like, okay, I need to open a brewery.
Yeah.
Like, and it was awful timing though. I mean, I never want to experience all of what that was again. We, in September, what is that? 2016. Yeah, that is 2016. So in September 2016, my boys were born. They were 10 weeks early. So they were in the NICU for 8 weeks, and I was still working at Noble at that time.
I had our oldest, who's now 14, was in the NICU for 12 days, but he was 6 weeks early. Yeah.
Oh man, it's rough.
Yeah.
It's rough. You're just you're helpless.
Yeah.
Completely helpless.
And I know the feeling.
And so then when the things finally change, they got out of there. We started working. me and Brian was the CEO at Noble, and then I was the brewer, and he had already left Noble back in like August of that year, and so he was trying to figure out what he was going to do, if he was going to just go be a CEO at another brewery,
Right.
or if he was going to start his own with me. And so we kept talking about it over and over, and then it wasn't until this brewery, Valiant, came to Brian, and they started talking about how they weren't doing well, and that they wanted to get out of the whole game. And so, yeah, we were just at the right place at the right time. We worked out this deal with those guys. We were able to buy all their equipment.
It's a massive acceleration in terms of getting a brewery up and online, compared to the like a year and a half build out phase and cutting trench drains and all the gigantic pain in the ass of getting permits in place and dealing.
So we still had to get all the permits, kind of changed over to us, but
right.
That wasn't that bad. But we ended up moving in April of 2017 and then opening up in June. And so we just, had this 2.5 months.
Moved in and opened up
2.5 months.
2.5 months later.
Yeah. It was awesome.
That is amazing.
So, I mean, it was a crazy time. Before that, I was a stay-at-home dad with the kids. My wife was working because she made more money than I did, and it made the most sense. And so we had that going. And then, April 2017, we flipped, and my wife started staying at home with the boys. And then I started up the Green Cheek thing with Brian, my business partner. And, we just started on this path of just working endlessly. And like that first year,
it's the dream, right? That's what everybody dreams about when they want to own their own brewery.
I think that's the thing that like we're
just going to be drinking beer and hanging out with our friends all day. It's just going to be this it's going to be so good.
Well, it's like I think that guys getting into working into a brewery for the first time, that's what they're thinking. So I already had like this experience to where I knew that wasn't the case.
Right.
But the thing that I think Brian and I joke about more than anything else is like this one line where it's like, oh man, yeah, let's open up a brewery, dude. We're gonna have more time. We're gonna make more money. Like that's what we need to be doing instead of just working our lives away for somebody else. And it's like, I would take working for somebody else any day of the week. Like I literally I'd love to do like a CBC talk on don't open a brewery.
Yeah.
I could probably do the same thing on don't have kids, but like, only because it's like, it's way more work than you could ever imagine. And it's extremely difficult. Like that first year of the business, between trying to do everything myself, which like was a problem in itself that took some time to get over, that I
got to delegate.
I got to hire more people. I need to delegate. But we also we didn't think that things were going to be successful right out of the gate. Yeah. And so the day that we opened up, we had a line of 50 people to get in, and it was just such a cool shock of how.
There's your humble brag again. Well done.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean it in a way that it's just like Brian and I were expecting to. We literally didn't hire anyone for the bar.
Oh gosh.
And at this point, we had one employee who his title is employee number one, and so it was just the three of us going through this whole thing. And then I had called my buddy who runs a restaurant locally, and he was going to bartend with us for the opening night. So I'm like, hey, it might be kind of busy, so we'll just do, if you guys can, if you can come down and bring a friend, one of your bartenders, it'd be great.
Right.
And so then the four of us bartended the first night, and it was just insane. and then Brian and I are just like, okay, I guess we have to hire a staff. And because
quickly.
Well, because we didn't want to open the doors and then just no one shows up, and we're like, cool. Well, I can at least get some work done while I'm here, and the tasting room's open, and I can pour a beer every once in a while or whatever.
Right.
And so, once seeing that, it was that was a cool moment. And then Yeah, it's been fun.
And you got things off the ground pretty quickly. By the time World Beer Cup of 2018 came around, you did all right in a pretty hotly contested category in that one, and won a silver medal in American IPA for that one, and then followed it up with 2 bronzes at 2018 Great American Beer Festival. So 2018 didn't suck for you guys. Let's talk
pretty cool, man.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about West Coast IPA. But first, 5 generations of hops grown in Yakima Valley, Washington, sold directly from their farm to you at Hops Direct. Skip the middlemen. Go for the farm fresh green. Hops Direct's hops are harvested, processed, and kept in cold storage here on their farm until they are shipped straight to you. Find 100-plus domestic and imported varieties in pellet and leaf year-round on their website by the pound at wholesale pricing. Thanks for supporting family-owned. Shopping small is a big deal. www.hopsdirect.com, info@hopsdirect.com, or hit them up at Hops Direct. Also, balancing barley and hops is your expertise, and for Clarion Lubricants, food-grade lubricants is theirs. The team at Clarion knows that when it comes to making great beer, you're the expert. When it comes to supplying food-grade lubricants backed by service-oriented professionals, they're the experts. Clarion will work with you to create an efficient lubrication program that helps protect your brewery. To speak to an expert, dial 1-855-MY-CLARION. That's 1-855-692-5274, or visit ClarionLubricants.com. Clarion Lubricants, the expert that experts trust. So, you win all of this in 2018 on the American IPA front.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that. As we are tasting beers, and as we've tasted beers through our IPA issue this year, which is, means breweries send us hundreds and hundreds of IPAs to taste through, we found it really fascinating to see how American IPA as a style is evolving.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely moving, more onto these contemporary hops flavors, a little more fruit and tropical fruit. Bitterness is dialing back significantly.
Yeah.
Body, caramel malts are starting to disappear.
Yep.
All of these pieces seem to be moving, and the dry hopping load is definitely increasing. And so we're watching, even West Coast IPA not become the equivalent of hazy IPA, but also kind of learn from that general process, and kind of borrow the things that work while still kind of retaining some of that, crisper, sharper, West Coast IPA feel. Talk to me a little bit about how you see that happening and how you've pushed in these kinds of directions with the American style, West Coast style IPAs that you brew.
Yeah, I mean, I think I continue to try as many of the beers that I can out there, and it is interesting watching this beer style evolve. I love watching something, like American IPA continue to change nationwide to where, people were brewing these West Coast IPAs were so over the top, aggressively bitter. And I enjoyed, I actually, side subject or tangent is just I had Bagby Beers, What a Time to Be Alive IPA, and it's this American IPA. And I can't remember the last time that I enjoyed a beer that had that big, aggressive, kind of resinous bitterness that, that worked so well with the rest of the beer, because I just end up staying away from, no offense, the stone beers and the green flash beers that were just they were just hitting you over the mouth with this resinous hop bitterness. And so I ended up falling more in love with the Russian River beers and the Firestone beers, and even early on the Ballast Point Sculpin, where it's just having a Ballast Point Sculpin for the first time, and then also just the Russian River IPAs, and just kind of sitting back and going what is it that I like about this? Why is it different? And a lot of it had to do with that more tropical sort of hop character, definitely in something like Sculpin. And then from the first time that I started making American IPA, the first one I had done was at Hangar 24. I made this Columbus IPA. mainly because they were just really long on Columbus, and so I had to I was told I had to work that in somehow,
Sure.
and so
Well, there are worse hops to have to work with.
oh man, I can't stand that hop anymore. I just it blew me out forever.
Yeah.
And so, that was a base of, at the time, it was Maris Otter and C60. And it was this very, caramely IPA with some sweetness and then this aggressive, resinous bitterness. And, I think that, those beers are still cool. You can, but for me, I just end up not liking that direction nearly as much as the direction that I continued to go with these beers from when I was working at Noble and continuing to make the beers at Noble was I just continued to realize the more that I took that crystal malt out of the beer, the more I would pull a sample and go, oh, I like this more. Like it already
What is it about that though?
I think
why?
because I think the crystal malt thing ends up tasting like an old beer when you first make it. It already
Sure.
somehow does that, right? So it's it's just interesting the way that your mind can work on that, and of course oxidation characters can be reminiscent of the crystal malt thing, but the more that I continue to take that crystal malt character out of there and then just work on the water profile and and understand how to use the salts in my favor to create body from that. And
What does that mean though?
yeah, I mean
Is it the types of salts that you're using, or is it? It's more than just quantity then, and ratios.
right, ratios. I mean the ratio that I end up liking is almost a 2-to-1, where it's 2 parts gypsum to 1 part chloride for West Coast IPA, because I think it brings just enough sulfate to the game to where it's just noticeable, but more importantly, it helps dry out the palate. And so I'm not a firm believer in the idea that sulfate accentuates hops. I think that that's a bullshit line. But what I do think it does is it brings a dryness to the beer that you may want. If you're looking to lighten up a beer or you're looking to dry it out, that's where sulfate comes in. On the other hand, chloride is all about just filling out the beer and the mouthfeel and everything. And so, anyway, and then I've continued to just...
Are there specific types that you prefer in terms of your sulfates and chlorides?
Oh, no, they did,
Okay.
all the same that I know of. But
I know a few other brewers that get a little picky about...
oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I've never...
Maybe on the hazy side. Anyway, we'll broach that.
that other chloride that I got from this other supplier definitely doesn't have the same hit.
I'm just saying.
Oh man, yeah, I gotta look into
There's
this.
some conversations out there. There you go. Okay. So you're working on water chemistry. You've certainly started pulling out crystal malts. Talk to me a little bit about some of the envisioning hops, and then the ways that you are using those hops to kind of push this character that you're looking for in the West Coast IPA.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, having a higher alpha hop is nice for bittering. And so, and then I'm also looking for a low cohumulone hop so that I can get less aggressive bitterness.
Okay.
Because then you end up getting what's it called, a harshness, with those higher cohumulone hops, and so that ends up being an important thing to look at. So for me, I use Simcoe for bittering, and I try to get that higher alpha Simcoe. We do for West Coast IPA. I think the last recipe we do about 100 IBU charge for bittering. The base beer is just 100% Pilsner malt. I don't see the point of using anything else. I just want rad hop character.
Okay.
And so,
are you boiling longer or doing anything else to add color into that mix? Obviously, Pilsner's going to be really, really light.
Yeah, we end up doing a 90-minute boil, mainly based off of the fact that I need to make sure that I'm getting at least a 7% evaporation for DMS precursors. And so if I can get get that going, then I'm in a good spot. And so then we'll do this. We'll do a 90-minute boil at 100 IBU. The moment the boil is done, we are hitting it with cold water to bring down the temperature immediately, so that we can keep DMS out of the game, DMS precursors. And so we're then doing a pound per barrel whirlpool with a range of different hops. If it's more classic West Coast, we'll go all Simcoe through the whirlpool as well, and then and then we have a range of like 5 different like West Coast IPA brands that just all have a different dry hop. They're all pretty similar for the base, and we'll slightly change color here and there, or we'll use something like Gambrinus Pils for some of the newer school ones where we want it super light in color. And then on the other ones where we're looking for a little bit of color, we can use some Mar Pilsner and maybe a dab of Carafa just to throw in a touch of color.
Yeah.
And so, so then we end up going that route. And then on the dry hop end, we are looking at, we dry hop once, we wait for attenuation. For West Coast IPA, we wait for attenuation to finish enough to be able to harvest yeast, and then we're dry hopping, just adding it to the top of the tank. And then for those beers, we do about a 3 pound per barrel dry hop, and then we then just wait for hop creep.
Bags loose.
We use pellets.
Okay.
We use pellets and just dump them in, but and then we just wait for hop creep, and that, so that can be, for us, that can
hop
be from...
creep, it's such a thing right now.
Oh, it's the worst. Like, it's the worst because it's a newer thing. When I was making beers at Noble, doing the same things, and then I swear I want to say 2017 harvest of hops and on has been, not 2016. 2016 harvest and on has been the change.
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing, that people talk about is the hopping or the kiln temperature.
Kiln temperatures, yeah.
And it's just hilarious. Brewers, we've been asking forever, oh man, you got to bring down that kiln temperature, really just keep all the aromatics that we're looking for in these hops.
Right.
And then the moment they do that, we're then going, well, shit, man, now my 7-day dry hop is now a 10 or a 14-day dry hop.
Right.
And so, it definitely changes everything.
We've had a lot of conversations about that, and obviously there's a whole bunch of different methods to try to combat or just accelerate it and get it over with as fast as you possibly can. But yeah, I think that speaks to the idea that all of this is evolving. The agriculture is evolving, the brewing is evolving, processes are evolving, and it speaks to this beautiful system of feedback between brewers and the agricultural side to answer those questions, to create more problems, and then figure out how to answer those, solve those new problems that you create. But it seems like we're still moving in that right direction. Talk to me a little bit when you're thinking about these hops combinations as you build some of these new IPAs. You mentioned you've got at least 5 different brands of West Coast IPA. Mm-hmm. How do you think about differentiating flavors among those so that they are different and unique experiences for customers?
Yeah, I mean, to be as blunt as or be as transparent as I can about this, I think that we started off with changing things slightly from brand to brand, and as time has gone on, I've wanted more of a differentiation between them, and so I'm trying to continue to change more than just the dry hop on these beers, and so changing IBU or hop schedule in the kettle for certain beers, and but when it comes to the dry hop, I mean, that ends up being the driving force of what really changes those, the flavor and the aromatics of those beers. And so it's like, with hops being the agricultural product that they are, or at least I end up changing the dry hop schedule every year. So
For every new every new harvest year.
Yeah, every new
Okay.
harvest year, there's percentages
Right,
of
right.
hops change in every way. So it's just like, the first thing that we're looking forward to, the moment that we're getting these new hops in, is doing single dry hopped IPAs into our 5-barrel tanks. And so we have some we'll do West Coast IPA in our 60-barrel tanks, and so we can just pull that over to a 5-barrel tank right before dry hop. We can hit it with just the brand new lot of Citra, or just the brand new lot of Simcoe or Mosaic, and then we can just start working on these side by sides of what are these hops actually doing in the beer. Because as brewers, we spend a lot of time doing these rubs, where we're smelling hops, and we're kind of coming up with this opinion of what we think this certain lot is.
Sure. It's a little speculation based on experience, but still speculative.
Absolutely. And so it ends up being one of those things to where it really doesn't matter until you finally get the hops in the beer and you see how they perform.
Right.
Because there's been countless times where I've smelled what I thought were incredible lots of hops, and then the way that they act in the beer, I'm second guessing and going like, oh man, what did I not get right with this selection? And so that becomes difficult. And so there's years where you have the best thing that you have is your Citra. There's years where you have the best thing is your Mosaic, or whatever other hop. And so it's just a matter of continuing to like drop and hire certain amounts of these hops so that you can still make an expressive beer that is the hop bomb that you're kind of like hoping to make. I want something that's very aromatic, that is bitter but not aggressively resiny, sticky bitterness, but like I think our IPAs our West Coast IPAs actually end up drinking more like certain people's pale ales. Like they just have, like, even at 7% or 7.2%, they have a drinkability to them that is just there. And so I want that to be able to, the moment you smell it, be able to, for it to pop. But I think that's all brewers.
Sure. I do like that idea, though, of brewing small, probably taproom only, 5-barrel batches of this, where you can really evaluate that. I mean, in talking to other brewers, some are doing it on 1-barrel batches on a pilot system. Some are going full in on 15 and 20-barrel batches and just saying, fuck it, let's try it and see how it works. And if we need to fix it in the dry hop after we're tasting it and coming out, then we'll keep fixing it at that point. But that idea of being able to evaluate each hop individually through that kind of single hopped approach is kind of a nice one, and still seems like it's something you can sell and be confident in selling, even if it's not exactly or perfectly, or at least helps you understand how those kinds of changes happen. What that raises a question for me. What are some of the changes that you actually taste, in those hops from that point of rubbing it and what you think it's going to end up in a beer like, to actually tasting that beer? Where has some of that disconnect been? What have you smelled and thought you're going to get that you didn't get? And have you been able to figure out why some of those things are the way they are, to be able to correct for it when you're selecting in future years?
Yeah, I think, I end up getting a lot of help from the guys at Cellar Maker.
Mm-hmm.
So Tim and Connor at Cellar Maker are some of my favorite people to smell hops with. And last year we smelled a bunch of hops together. And if you ever have the chance to, like, for all the brewers out there, to rub some hops with Connor from Cellar Maker, it is an event. I mean, like, the descriptors that guy uses is, it is so much fun. I mean, like, one of the ones that I give him the most shit for is cotton candy pixie dust. And so there's,
I definitely want to taste that hop.
Oh man. And so it is fun, though. It's incredibly frustrating and to do hop selection, and also very fun. And you get to be able to have this connection to the hop farmer and the overall process. I mean, just being in Yakima during that time of selection is so invigorating as a brewer, and just like the excitement of, like, all right, man, like, what am I going to get for this year? And it's like you can absolutely get a couple turds, but you can also hopefully end up with a hop that you're surprised about. I think that like the thing that I've been, I think, thinking about the most is the first couple times that I was doing hop selection. I hate onion and garlic character in hops, as an example. And so I was trying to avoid that at all costs. And what I've continued to be able to figure out is like there's this level of onion and garlic in the hops that brings intensity that is all fruit and so insanely good. And so you have to kind of find this, like, for these high aroma
it's almost
hops.
like salt making caramel, pop out of a flavor.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Having some of that thing that by itself might not be pleasant, but in combination actually helps heighten some other elements of that flavor.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And it's interesting because we
as long as it's not only onion and garlic.
Oh my god, I hate that stuff. So I think in 2017, smelling through hops, it was and then before that at Noble, it was like, okay, yeah, trying to get the least amount of that character as possible. And then last year at Harvest, we ended up selecting a lot that had a little bit more onion garlic, but it also had all of these higher levels of intensity of different fruit and everything. And so we ended up selecting this lot, and it was so cool because in the beer we ended up with no onion garlic. People just call it OG. And
no OG, okay.
Yeah, so you're just looking for no OG. And then so we ended up with no OG in the beer, and then on the other hand just got this powerhouse mosaic. And so it was so cool to just continue to like learn a little bit more about like, hey, how does it smell on the table versus how it ends up in the beer. And so continuing to learn that from year to year. I'm sure I'm going to learn another lesson this year on how I selected hops and trying to take the best notes while at the selection table to sort of go, hey, this is why I'm picking this hop. And just writing down as much as you can so that whenever you go to reference those notes and you have the beer in front of you, you can go, oh, okay, and then hopefully make a new note of just, well, next time, we're going to want less onion garlic than what you thought was good, or, a range of other things. And so, yeah, it was pretty cool. This one of the cool things that I from selection this last year that was really cool was Chuck Silva was there from Silva Brewing Company, formerly of Green Flash, and he was selecting with our group, and he there was these two different lots of Citra on the table, and to have him there was really exciting for me because I respect the hell out of that guy. And so he there was this lot of Citra that I didn't prefer as much, and there was this other lot of Citra that I really loved. And so he just like has this whole like comment where he's like, yeah, I really like the Citra over here because it's more classic citrus character, and the lot that you like, on the other hand, is more pineapple, tropical fruit, but it doesn't smell like Citra. And for me on my end, I don't care what the hop variety is. Right. And so like I'm all about that pineapple and that tropical fruit, and I'm going straight for that. And so we all like, it's neat to see all of us selecting differently to where I know I can adjust our hop program however in order to make that Citra pop the right way. But other people on the other hand are looking for a pinpoint character that might not be there.
Well, that's the thing. When you're selecting, you're not choosing between good and bad. It's not this binary, hey, this is good and this is bad. If it were that simple, then you wouldn't need to go out there and rub and smell and taste these kinds of things. Not your tasting, rubbing hops, but through that process, you are, it's it's almost like saying, yeah, there's this pigment of paint, this, red, better or worse than this other shade. Well, it's all a matter of preference based on what you're trying to accomplish and how you're trying to kind of create this thing. And so, that's a fun way. Are there any other kind of combinations that you envision, or any kind of, spark of creativity that, these things pull out for you, where you start thinking about ways that different hops combinations can complement each other?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I'm the most excited about, if I'm not going too much off the subject, is Strata. So Strata from Indie Hops. Not that I want to give them a plug, because I think everyone's going to try to buy all those hops, and then I'm not going to be able to buy them anymore. But
just get your contracts in place and don't worry about it, right?
Oh man, that hop variety is just the best thing to come out since Mosaic. Like, it is so. It's an absolute powerhouse of fruit, and so it's like. It's so neat this will be our first year on contract with Strata, and so I'm really excited about getting that into our program and seeing how it works as a smaller component to a larger component in the beer. So that's exciting, but just smelling and tasting through these different hops, or not tasting, smelling through these different hops.
Sorry, that was my fault.
You gave me the tasting thing. Which happens on accident, by the way. Like, you have all this lupulin on your hands, and then like, oh man, if you rub your eye,
it's the worst.
Like, you're fucked. Like, but on the other hand, like, like maybe like you just kind of like put your finger in your mouth or something. Like, you're just sitting there like, oh, why did I do that? I mean, like, I don't know why you'd put your finger in your mouth any other time anyway, but never mind. I mean, like,
you're like picking up a cracker or something, and it's like it gets on. Yeah, I get you. I know where you're going.
Yeah, But yeah, smelling through the new lots, the thing I honestly just get the most excited about is just how does this translate into the beer, and then from there, like, how do we just continue to make better beer with these hops, and give the respect to these farmers that put all of this work into this agricultural product, and how can I use it the best way possible.
Yeah. You before we started talking about hops, you mentioned pulling some other levers, as you work to differentiate some of your other IPAs from each other. Talk to me a little bit about some of those other elements that you're tweaking in order to produce some different experiences and a little more diversity among your West Coast IPAs.
Yeah, I mean, so the biggest changes for the West Coast IPAs end up being those slight changes in color and base malts. And then the way that we're hitting the hop schedule on some of those beers, if we're trying to make a West Coast IPA that just has like the absolute cleanest bitterness, which wouldn't be like a competition beer at all, because I think it's too, modern or new school or whatever. It's not quite American IPA, but it's still fun to do, is just all hop extract for bittering, and then doing this big whirlpool charge, and ending up with this beer that just drinks so pleasantly full and bitter, but in a way that almost isn't quite IPA, but it almost ends up being more Pilsner-y like of sorts, but I'm in love with it, and so. That's a fun thing. And then changing hop schedule in order to have some of these beers have a little bit more resinous quality to them, and so hitting them for like a 30-minute edition and a 15-minute edition in light amounts in order to help build this structure that does have a little bit of that sticky resinous quality that lingers on your palate a little bit differently. And so that hop tannin structure, I think, ends up just being a good experience depending on how you're trying to build it. And so we're continuing to, so we differentiate our, the range of different IPAs that way. And then on the dry hop side, continuing to work on, what excites us, and then hopefully what other people might get excited about too. And so we have Radiant Beauty is our maybe most, not classic, and because I don't even think that like I don't think that we're making classic American IPA necessarily by any means, but we
a little more throwback to the old school style.
well, I mean, like yeah, like I mean, because we're not we don't use caramel malt,
Right.
We the more dextrins that we put in the beer, hop creep just slowly chews through, and so we're just adding more tank time if we use any dextrinous malts or if we do a higher mash temp, and so everything about these beers are already lean, and and it's just the ABV that ends up filling out the beer the most. Yeah, for something like Radiant Beauty, we do what we like to call the Holy Trinity. The Holy Trinity is Citra, Mosaic, and Simcoe. I think there's a way to do that. And then we have West Coast IPA is Dead, which is a name that Paul Jones from Cloudwater, he made this statement at a Southern California, it was at Modern Times, it's like hop seminar, and he's up on this panel, and he's just like, starts talking about hazy IPA, and he's just like, look, man, West Coast IPA is dead. And he's saying this to an entire crowd of Southern California brewers that are all like, the majority of these guys are making West Coast IPA. And so just like one of my favorite like lines ever. And so we named a beer after that. We also have Happily Deceased, which is a Nelson. We've been getting these great Nelson and Motueka from Freestyle Farms out of New Zealand. Right. And oh my God, it's just so nice to get Nelson, without having to buy it on the spot market for $30 a pound or whatever. And instead we can get it through Freestyle and actually get contracted out, and I don't have to trade my firstborn for him, And so that's super sweet. So that's a Nelson Mosaic combination. We also have Member IPA. That is a question mark on the end, and that's an all Mosaic IPA. And so, I mean, like, overall, it's like they're all Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe, Nelson, and soon-to-be Strata beers.
Okay.
And then once we, figure out what that next hop is, we'll be incorporating that too.
Before we were talking about whirlpooling, you mentioned hitting it with some water to bring temperature down. Yeah. So you're doing a little lower temperature whirlpool than... what do you find, what temperature you generally shoot for, and how does that impact, bitterness pickup even through that kind of whirlpool? How do you adjust for that as you're thinking about a recipe and understanding what those different whirlpool temperatures do to affect the impact of the hops? Yeah,
I mean, overall, we for those West Coast IPAs, I think we end up hitting about 190 for that whirlpool temperature. And I mean, the main reason why I ended up doing it from the first place was the heat exchanger that we have is just slightly undersized, and so I'm uncomfortable with the amount of time that it takes to get hot wort through that heat exchanger and then into the fermenter. And so in order to give us some more time before we're adding too much DMS or above the threshold of DMS, then we're hitting it with that water charge. And so just through the experience of continuing to make and dial in the beer and then tasting it, it's just like, cool, this part of it is not going to change. The say pound per barrel of hops and that temperature is going to be the constant. All I need to do on the other end is just adjust that 60 or 90 minute addition of hops in order to get the structure that we're looking for. And so, there's times where we feel like the beer is just is too aggressively bitter, and so we'll bring it down on the next batch, and vice versa. And so it's our entire program is really. Are you double batching into tanks or triple or quadruple batching? I'm not. What size is the brew house? Or we do 25 barrel batches, and those go into. We do 2 batches into a. So you can adjust, batch to batch if something comes up. Yeah. Absolutely. But like, I'm mainly talking about finished beer is what we're tasting, and so it's like, the entire program we have IBU numbers that we use to like bitter the beer and yada yada yada, but I'm not getting them tested because all I care about is how does it taste?
Right.
And so then it's just a matter of adjusting the palate from there and going like, hey, do I want, to stick some hops over on this side, or do I just want to increase the hop bitterness? And so I think it's just a range of those types of directions to where it's just, a palate-driven program.
How do you then, take what your sensory is and convey that in actionable, instructions to a brew house staff?
That is one of the bottlenecks of our company. Okay. Absolutely. I write all the recipes for everything that we do, and I just taste the beer when it's finished, and then I make some notes, and then the next time we're making that beer or a similar beer, I'm applying whatever that sort of lesson was. And so my small staff right now, I only have 2 other people other than me.
Okay.
But I've continued to work myself out of the brewery, and so I'm physically not brewing very often these days. Maybe a couple times a month or something like that, whenever somebody needs a day off,
right.
The range of other things. But they just know that that I'm going to give them the recipe, and then they're going to make it, and it's not like the question is always, hey, I see we have West Coast IPAs dead on the schedule. Anything you want to change about it? And then immediately, I'm working on that and then finishing up that brew sheet and giving it to them, because there's almost always an improvement, in my opinion, somewhere with every single beer.
That's an interesting philosophy, and it's one that I personally agree with. I know not every brewer, approaches it that way. Some view recipes as recipes,
right,
and sacrosanct, and let's not change it. And then there are others that view the beer being the brand and the relationship to that, and as palates change and as tastes change among your consumers, those recipes ought to kind of move with them, so that they hit people with that same kind of expectation. Neither of them is right or wrong; they're just different viewpoints to approach these things from. It seems like you kind of lean towards the latter on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I mean, when you look at those 2 different sort of philosophies on whether it's the recipe or the evolution of a beer, at BJ's and Hangar 24 was all about the recipe. You don't deviate from the recipe. That's it. We'll change other processes if we need to, but that's the recipe. Don't change it. And on the other hand, I think what I ended up learning from when I worked with Victor Novak at Taps was this approach that I currently have, which is, no, we're brewers. We're working with an agricultural product, and we're going to continue to evolve all of these beers over the course of time, and you end up having recipes that you feel like are tried and true.
Sure.
For maybe a year or 2.
Right.
Maybe 6 months, and then all of a sudden, you learn something, you're doing an off-flavor course, or you're doing a range of other things. You're just, reading and learning, and all of a sudden, or you just have somebody else's beer that, inspires you in a certain way to, you're like, you know what, I'm going to start doing this now. And then, just being able to be small enough to be able to make those changes, I think, is one of my favorite parts of being a small brewer. And I think it ends up being the thing that drives just the evolution of our beers, for sure.
I like that, and I equate it to artists looking at and contemplating each other's work and moving aesthetics in a direction.
Yeah.
That when you look at schools of art, artists responded to each other and new possibilities, and folks innovated, and folks looked at that and couldn't make the same art that they made before, because what that artist put out there changed the way that they even looked at the world and at light and at shape and et cetera.
Sure. Yeah.
And so when you look at it, not to get too pretentious about this, but there is that process of creative people interacting with each other, pushing each other, making suggestions and creating new opportunities and showing what's possible.
Right.
And once you see what's possible in this other kind of way, it can also be impossible to go back to that old way that you did things. Just it doesn't feel relevant. It doesn't feel now. It doesn't feel current. It doesn't feel like what you should be making.
Yep, totally agree.
And so those are definitely valid kind of approaches to be taking. On that same vein, I'm not going to let you get out of here without talking to me about brewing for competition.
Sure.
You mentioned it earlier, and you mentioned talking about brewing, styles that were more tap room based, where they're full and big, and will appeal to your consumer base right there. As something that might be a little different than brewing to win competitions based on how the judges kind of perceive these things. Talk to me a little bit about how you balance those things.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it's such a funny conversation because it's like it's all just me thinking that I know maybe what judges are looking for.
Right.
And that in itself is just absolutely ridiculous. Like that's that
you're chasing a moving train right there. It's going to be in a different place every time, right?
Right, and so that in itself is hilarious. And so trying to just be real with yourself of like brewing for a competition. It's like I love Nelson in an American IPA, but there's no way I'm going to be entering a Nelson beer into that category because I don't think when the range of judges smell that beer, Nelson is a polarizing hop. Some people absolutely love it, and they get all of the Sauvignon Blanc or the gooseberry or the range of other flavors, and other people smell and all they smell is diesel. And so I think like you have to know these certain sort of hits that will be the right beer at the right time. These beers take, you send them in a month and a half before they're judged, and so your dissolved oxygen levels have to be insanely low for for something to hit for an IPA or whatever else. And so it's like trying to pretend to know what the beer is going to taste like in 8 weeks is or 6 weeks from like when you packaged it is a little difficult. But I end up saving those beers and trying them the same week of competitions to just get a better idea of like, hey, how well did we do on this? I'll have one bottle that's stored warm and one bottle that's not, and then I'll be able to do a side by side, and I'll even do it with a fresh IPA that's on tap as well. And then because we spend about 2 to 3 weeks, most of our IPAs are only being served for 3 weeks typically. Top, and then we're rotating to a brand new beer, so it's just trying to always keep fresh beer on tap. But anyway, but brewing for competition, it's I think
have you found that in some of that tasting that certain hop varieties or certain ingredients will hold better over that kind of time and reflect better when in that 8 weeks when the judges are actually going to taste it?
Yeah, I mean, I think every time that I think I've known, I ended up like proving myself wrong. Okay, so I feel like it's like, quite possibly has more to do with our continuing to get better and better at our process to keep dissolved oxygen levels really low so that those hops don't die out and they can just pop.
Right.
And so that ends up being quite possibly the most important thing, because like that you could have a beer with half of the dry hop load that yours does, but if you have a hit of oxygen in that beer with however you packaged it, and you have your 3 pound per barrel dry hop, it doesn't matter. You have your 5 pound per barrel dry hop, it doesn't matter. Like you just fucked up your beer, and this other one over here smells and tastes way better. And so
do you have a specific then bottling process for these? I imagine you're not going to throw it off of your standard bottling line.
I mean,
hand bottling. Do you have any special mythology and ritual around this?
The ritual is me with a little counter pressure homebrew filler that I hook up to the tank and bottle straight from the tank. But it's an incredibly frustrating process in every way. Like, I try to tell the entire staff, like, okay, just stay clear of me today. You're going to see me upset. And look, I know that this is still a childish thing to say, but I'll be over here, and I'm going to continue to be pissed off all day. And so it's like, because I'm just like sitting there and I'm just like trying to get the perfect fill to where it just like domes over the very top of the neck like perfectly, and then like encap it, and like, you know, making sure that that's dense foam instead of the those big like fisheye bubbles and like a range of other things. And so it's just like, you know, it's fun. It's in the worst of ways. I just like to then try to get, say, 6 perfect bottles, and then you finally have those, and you're like, okay, cool. Okay, now I can move on with my day, and I'm gonna go clean up this bottle I threw over here, and you know, I'm gonna go apologize to this staff member and buy them lunch or something. But anyway, I think overall, like the biggest advice that I have, especially now as judging for the last 3 years at JBF, is just look at the way that they describe the beer and try to look at it from an outsider point of view. Does your beer taste exactly the way that they're describing it there? And if it doesn't, don't put it in that category. Don't be the guy that's like, oh no man, this isn't Helles. That's not how you describe Helles. And then you submit your Helles that is more of a Pilsner, and you go, yes, that's a Helles. No, you're gonna lose. Like that's not how it works. And so yeah. Because we sit there as a group and we read through the style guidelines, and you find the beer that hits that exactly, and you go, yep, that's it. And that also tastes and smells the best too, of course.
So what's next for Green Cheek? What's on the horizon?
Oh man, we have a range of different ideas, but as of now, we're coming up on like 2.25 years or old or whatever we are right now. But we're at about 1,500, 1,800 barrels. We don't produce a lot. We half of what we make gets drank up in the tasting room or direct sales for cans, and then the other half we put in kegs and do a very small distribution network in Orange County, LA, and San Diego, to just our favorite beer bars. So that's what we have working for us now. We're talking about another location. We're talking about a possible restaurant or something. But like, I don't know. We're trying to figure out, like, we're just trying to figure this whole thing out. And like, you know, I don't know all the answers. Like, I'm just trying to figure out like what's the best thing for our company and our employees, and for Brian and myself and our future. And so, you know, the goal is to hopefully raise a couple boys that want to be brewers, and I can pass the brewery off to them at some day. But like, you know, I also keep thinking about how twisted it is for me to think like, hey, you're gonna want to do this, like,
right,
because it's absolutely the hardest thing I've ever done.
Evan Price, Green Cheek Beer. Woo! Thanks for joining me on the podcast. Hey, mention this podcast to receive up to $1,000 worth of glycol with the purchase of any new G&D chiller. Use code BREWING for $10 in beer money at Tavour. Buy direct from the farm at hopsdirect.com. Clarion Lubricants are the experts that experts trust. If people want to find Green Cheek Beer, where do they find you?
Check out our Instagram. I mean, that's where most of our information flows. Just about all of our information flows through our Instagram. So that's just Green Cheek Beer, at Green Cheek Beer. And then
come visit you in the tap room.
Yeah, same thing for the website, just Green Cheek Beer. But yeah, I mean, come to the tap room is really the best way to experience what we are and what we do. And it's a range of we do a lot of lager brewing these days, Helles and Pilsner. We try to keep those on all the time. We do West Coast IPAs. Mixed cultures, sour beers, and then just like hazy IPAs and a range of like weird hazy IPA type beers.
Well, Evan, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, man,
it's been a pleasure.
Thank
you. And we'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Cheers.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.